This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee bequest for the work of our team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winifred Lewis. I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Queensland.
Hey guys, I'm Austin Manchotti. I'm a research assistant on the project.
Hi, my name is Naba Sorn, and I'm a psychology student here at UQ.
Yeah. And what we're doing is we're making videos about each of the chapters in the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. And today we're here to make a video introduction to chapter 23, which is titled Commercialization, Environmentalism, and the Capitalist Market. And the author is Philip Balziger, and he's a sociologist at the University of Neuchâtel. And the first thing he does, as you would expect, is to define commercialization. And I'll just read that out for the benefit of other psychologists that may not have their heads around this concept. It's a process whereby things that were outside the market become part of the market and become products or product qualities that are bought and sold. So part of what's going on with commercialization in the environment movement is that it's becoming part of our everyday capitalism to consider the environment and to reflect on how environmental sustainability is a factor in our purchasing decisions and in the products being developed and made. And I guess one of the sections of the chapter is called Adaptive Environmentalism, Saving the Environment Through Green Capitalism. What does the author mean by that, Napasorn?
Okay, so in environmentalism as a whole says that consumer culture and the globalized economy is what causes environmental degradation.
Yeah.
But what adaptive environmentalists believe is that they believe that you can save the environment through green capitalism. So there are four businesses in developing market-related actions that make them greener. So what this means is that they're not trying to change the society. So they're not trying to get rid of capitalism or anything, but they're just trying to make the production and consumption greener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess we've all seen and purchased probably many of these products. So if you're trying to get, fair trade coffee, or if you're trying to buy an electric car or solar panels, or, use foods that are safer for the environment, you're really participating in this process. What are some of the, if I scroll down to my notes, sorry, some of the criticisms about this type of adaptive environmentalism are put forward in the other approach, which is called transformational environmentalism, which really seeks to understand that the whole economy has to change and capitalism itself has to be challenged. And so in this chapter, what are some of the ways in which he addresses this point? I guess when I read it, he was talking about, and I'll have to go back to my notes for this, trying to move beyond the idea of, labeling and sustainable development to really embracing the idea that the market itself is not always a solution. So we have to look at taxes and banning certain practices or, types of fuels, and enforcing strong environment standards through regulations. We also need to think about, in this approach, alternatives to the market that aren't based on profits. So it could be cooperatives, it could be dealing directly with farmers in a relationship that includes economic payment, but also a long-term commitment and a long-term trust. And finally, it also involves the idea that we should turn away from the idea of growth. So instead of valuing profit per se, we could challenge the idea of modern capitalism and say, look, this is alienating, and people are feeling like they have more and more products, but they're less and less happy, and the earth is being destroyed. So dating back to an influential book called Small is Beautiful, there's this sense that the modern state needs to change and reconnect individuals to each other, but also a new relationship of people to nature. And so this idea of degrowth, or décroissance, as a French writer wrote about it in the early 2000s, is that we should even challenge this idea that the way we want our societies to continue is to have more and more and do more and more. And so it's the idea of changing our lifestyle where we might work less and we might aim to own less and maybe have more relationships, more experiences. That's part of this transformative environmentalism. Now, I think, did I jump in where I was supposed to pass to you, Austin? Because I've got a section here, the consequences of commercialization. I can't remember if that was what I was supposed to talk about or you.
I think I was meant to talk about it, but you had a little bit of overlap. I think I can build
Go
a little
for it,
bit on
man.
what you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, as Winifred said, transformative environmentalism, they do see commercialization as a threat to alternative institutions, and the view has been supported by some sociological studies. For instance, I apologize for butchering the name, but I think the author Sky Dovella, I believe was the name, and they talked about how some of the products, particularly when they're made on, I think, bigger scale, then it's not sustainable. You know, you can buy the eco-friendly. This is just an example, right? You can buy eco-friendly plates and cutlery and whatnot, but when they make tens, hundreds, thousands of them, you know, it still creates environmental problems. And this sort of links into the next section of the chapter, where it's expected that, you know, creating all these eco-friendly products will equate to saving the environment, when on the whole, it's not really approaching global sustainability. And there's kind of this weird loop where it's like, yes, we're working to make the world better, but at the same time, there's no net huge effect on the entire global system.
Yeah.
Which I think passes on to the next section that you were going to talk about, Winifred.
Yeah, that's right. So the last substantive part of the chapter is kind of talking about the rise and fall of pro-environmental commercialization or green capitalism. And I guess what environmentalists feel is that the ultimate aim of the environmental movement is actually to prevent the incredible habitat destruction and climate change. So to the extent that green capitalism is slowing the pace of our deterioration, that's a good thing, but it's not enough. And so, for example, we can think about, as Austin just said, the fact that if people are making more and more green products, that's actually potentially not sustainable. And we can also look at whether businesses sometimes strategically use green capitalism to try and prevent people from regulating them and setting up rules and taxes. And we can also ponder the extent to which unsustainable capitalism and consumption has continued to rise. So if people bring in certification and regulation so that you might buy certain paper products because they have forest safe practices, that is a good thing. But on the other hand, in less well-regulated markets or for people that aren't invested, they're continuing to buy the other products. And in some cases, multinational corporations would shift their factories into areas that are less well-regulated so they can just continue to evade the rules and the practices that are better for the environment. And then there's a kind of reflection in this theme about how in the broader social justice movement, the environment movement that is a part of, capitalism is also being criticized for the way that it's changing the relationship of people to each other and to their societies. So in the broader social justice movement, there's a new anti-globalization thinking about how the supply chains that extend into other countries, you know, sometimes mean more poverty at home and fragility in the face of shocks like the pandemic, and new precarity for the young, where they never get proper jobs that continue and they're always having to scramble hand to mouth, being piled up with debt. So there's this new anti-capitalist imaginaries, as the sociologists call it, which means you're thinking about what the alternative is and thinking about how can we make sure that people have the housing security, the job security, the dignity and autonomy that they would want in a human society, as well as having a better planet. And so for those reasons, the author, you know, as he's closing the chapter, seems to be reflecting that commercialization as a central focus of the environment movement is going to be on the decline, and that new forces will rise. So I think in a way it's a really exciting chapter. I really enjoyed learning about it as a psychologist. had spent very little time, even though I study environmental protests, had spent very little time thinking about environmental businesses as a legitimate part of the climate movement. And it is exciting to think about all the entrepreneurs that are working in areas that are trying to do, new practices and businesses and products. And I do see that as something worth learning about in this chapter. Austin, what were your reflections? What was your take-home message?
I think it's a lot of the messages accumulated across the subsections of the chapter while reading it, because again, like you said, I've looked at these things in the past, but never actually explicitly thought about the relationships and all the factors that come to play. And well, for me, to be honest, the big thing was the thing I said before, when you looked at the consequences of commercialism and the rise and alleged fall of the, pro-market environmentalism. Because when there's more sustainable products coming in and there's changes to lifestyle, like grocery stores no longer use plastic bags, you have to bring your own bags.
Yeah.
You kind of assume on the whole there is, improvement. The world's getting better and everything, but it's a lot more complicated. It's not as black and white of, okay, if you put your rubbish in the recycling rather than the garbage, all of a sudden global warming just stops like that. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Huh.
There's a lot more to it. And I definitely think learning and continuing to do further research on that would be the biggest takeaway from all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Napasorn? What did you take away from the chapter?
So I learned how in adaptive environmentalism they were talking about why green entrepreneurship is good, right? Because
Yeah.
they're like creating alternatives that are better in the production, right? But the thing is that they're also profit oriented. So
Yeah.
what happens is that when a small business gets bigger, they may shift away from their core values of saving the environment to just only caring about the profit. And I
Yeah.
also learned, like, during cap and trade markets, it's good, right? Because you're only allowed to produce a certain amount of pollution. And if you want to pollute more, you have to buy your rights on the market, right? But environmental economists say that this is like a really efficient way of reducing these emissions. But the thing is that these businesses can just buy more carbon credits. So it's kind of like these are disadvantages, but there are also like drawbacks to them.
Yeah, I think if you're not an economist and you're looking at this market and you're kind of like, so what you're saying is really rich companies, the ones that probably created the problem in the first place, are now in a position where they can continue to buy credits and pollute more and more. There seems to be something wrong with that. But I mean, it's the data is there to show that it can make a difference, and it has motivated firms to change. One thing, I think it was in this chapter, where they commented that huge companies like BP has now committed to move away from fossil fuels. And that kind of change, it's really significant, right? So it's a way of how economic levers can change the way that companies are reacting, which then has implications for the planet. But I guess the question is, can they change them fast enough? And is it really ever going to work if we don't take the earth more seriously? If we don't understand that actually, money is not the common denominator. We all actually need water, food, and air. That's actually our goal. So yeah, it was really great chapter, really interesting. Well, we might finish there unless you guys want to say anything else, Austin or Napasorn. Okay, well, thank you to you both for being part of the recording, and thank you to our viewers for being with us today. Bye now.
Yeah.
Bye.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.